Okay, so this is the second part of Introduction to Vex. What I'm going to do over here is we're going to go a little bit deeper on how we can use and manipulate attributes that we give on objects through the VobSop, and so we will add some attributes and use them to do some things. Right. So we start off with a simple grid right here, and let me just increase a little bit, not the size, but the detail that we have, like this, because this will make it a little bit easier to work with. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take a paint node and I'm going to paint it right over here. So first I'm going to use a color, and I'm going to set a color which gives me like a black surface. Now I set this node default to black, so it's immediately turning to black right here. Then I'm using a paint node, and adding this paint node I'm going to draw with a red color. I see that it is complaining for some reason. Indefinite recursion in evaluation, so perhaps I have to just add it once again. And it seems not to work. Alright, so I just had to do this over again. So right now this thing is working back, and what I'm going to do is changing so that I have just one color, one red tone, in which I have a pure red, of course. And let's see what we have over here. I'm going to adjust the brush as well, changing the radius pressure, making it a little bit lower, and also changing the opacity, make it also a bit lower, so that I can gradually paint more or less values. So this gives me the control that I want. So okay, now I do have this shape, and if we take again a VobSop and we connect it over here to this node, the thing that we can do immediately is we can, just like usual, use this, for example, in combination with a point position. Now, before I'm gonna go deeper into specifying different types of attributes or exporting the attributes, we're first going to see something different, and that is the way of converting values, because those are very important if you want to do specific things. For example, we right now have a color which is like a red, green and blue color, and I'm only interested in the red value over here. And I want to use this red value to displace in the Y channel. So there's no direct mapping possible, because the red would displace if I would immediately connect or add, for example, the color to the point position. Because it is red, it would just move into the X direction. So I want it to move into the Y direction. So if you're gonna see over here under convert, you see all these tools that you can use to change, to convert one thing to another. Now this is not the only one that you can use. You have here the possibility to convert from float to vector and all those things. You also find other tools which are very useful underneath vectors. And for example over here, get a certain vector component is like very useful. So this allows you to get one specific component. So I'm going to use this one right now. And as you can see, we have the vector as an input, and as an output we have just one floating channel. So I'm going to take over here the point color attribute, and right now we see the signature is like a 3D vector. We can take it as a 3D color. It doesn't matter really, in this case at least. So we can just use it as a color. And the thing that we see right over here is the component. So we're gonna take component 1. We have the choice of 3 components. Component 1 is therefore the X or the R for color. Now right over here we have the point position, and we want to open this up, this vector, so that we have 3 floats, that we can change one of those floats and recombine it into something new. So let's do that. There are two different ways that you can use. The first way is by using a conversion that we are going to use a float to a vector, which is something we're going to put over here, and a vector to a float, which we're going to put over here. So we get like this point position right here, and we can connect the x and the z value directly, and we're gonna use the red channel over here to connect it to the y channel. And so if we connect it right over here, you can see that we have directly our displacement. So this is very powerful. This is actually the same thing that you can do like in a point swap, but over here, since it is like a fixed code, it works much faster. And since this is like a visual interface, it might be much more useful for other people. You have to know that this is also generating a textual version. So for the people who are interested in working with VEX in a textual way, you can check this out. You can compile it and you can see the VEX code of this and see how you can work with that further on. But if you want to specialize in doing that, I would suggest to go to the home of Houdini, which is the Python language within Houdini. And Python is actually going to replace VEX in a matter of time. They don't have like a visual interface for that yet, but I expect this is going to change within a few versions of this one right now. Right. So this is like very first thing. Of course, you can do all kinds of other things or all kinds of other operators on this as well. For example, you can change right here the value. Let's say if we go over here to math, we can, for example, negate the value, so it goes down. If you connect it over here, this makes it just like a negative value. Or other things that you can use, which is very useful, is using the complement. And complement is just by default a1 minus a value that goes inside. So if you connect this one over here, you just flip it around from the original, as you can see. So these are all very useful tools, things which are really worth investigating. Now another way how to do this is by using over here, like you can for example get a vector component, you can also set a vector component. So you have, for example, a vector over here, and this is showing you the second way how to do something like this. And then we're going to set something, a vector component. We're going to set component 2, which is something we got over here, and we can connect it right like this. And so like that we get also the same result, but with fewer nodes. So getting a component and setting a component, and then again connecting to the output. Right, so this just a little bit to show how you can change certain kind of values. Okay, perhaps just one thing which is important is right over here, and I'm going to connect it directly. We have a float value, and this is also important to know in Houdini. If you connect a float value to a vector, it's gonna try to do a conversion automatically. So in this case, since it is a float, it's going to connect all three values for the vector with just this one float. And you will see, if you make a connection like that in which there is an automatic conversion, you will see the line as being a dotted line. So if we do this connection right here, and you can see everything has now gotten exactly the same value. That's why we get like this diagonal line right over here. But as you can see, this gives us a dotted value, and this really tells you that you have this automatic conversion going on. Now suppose we have the following problem. We already have a color over here on this surface, and I don't want to change it, or I don't want to use, for example, an attribute copy or an attribute transform later on, just to get the colors on the right spot. So I'm going to use a different kind of attribute, an attribute that we can't find right over here. So let's just do that, and I'm going to just remove these ones over here, and we're going to create for that a special attribute. So just creating an attribute right over here, and this attribute we're going to call, for example, height, because we're going to do exactly the same thing as we did before, but now with a totally different kind of attribute. So if you take now a paint node, we can put it over here, and we're not going to paint with color. Again, I'm going to activate this whole thing. Instead, we're going to override the color, and we're gonna paint with this attribute called height. And as you can see, we have like a different kind of setting for the whole node. So again, I'm going to change these properties, and perhaps I should make for that also immediately a different kind of preset, because most of the time I only use this as a preset to work with. And now you see the attributes that we're adding being represented as a heat map. So again, really fine detail control, everything that we want. Now we have something like this. So if we connect it right over here, we see there is happening something because this is being colored automatically. This is because we're showing it right over here as being visualized as infrared, but if we do it white to red or grayscale, you see it all gives us all kinds of different kind of effects, and I just want to have exactly what I've painted for. So instead of using color, we're going to use the attribute. Now to access this attribute, you can see we can't find it over here. We don't see it. Now the thing that we can do instead is we can do the following. We can create over here a parameter node. And as you can remember, this parameter node is doing exactly the same thing as over here, being this slider, something which we can move. But the very nice thing about Houdini is if you give it exactly the name of the attribute, then it allows to just read out the attribute for each point value. So the thing that you're doing over here is setting actually a value for each one of the points manually. Now if the attribute is already there, it's just setting for each one of those points that specific attribute. Now in this case it might be quite annoying. I mean, we now have a slider which is not working, and that's something we don't want to have. So what I'm going to do right here is I'm going to create right here an invisible parameter. So if I go up right now, we don't see the parameter appearing over here, but we do have the control to use a different kind of attribute to change the whole thing. So if you just now add a color node, then you can see it is not adjusting the height in whatever way. Okay, so let me just delete this one again. Now the thing that we can do is also something else. Right here we see this height attribute, and see it coming up. Now the thing that we can do as well is we can create a new attribute, and the way how to do this is you can use, for example, a parameter, and let's say that we want to have this point position also being represented somewhere else. So you can use this by using a parameter, and we're going to use this like out pos. Now in this case it's of course not very useful what I'm going to do. I mean, we're gonna see these points being represented anyway, but if you have like a much more complex system, sometimes it might be useful to have like different kinds of attributes being branched off from other parts. So the thing that you can do right here is we're gonna say that it's going to be exported, and we're gonna export it always. And if not, we're gonna use the input value if the parameter is not bound. But in the same time, the thing what we're going to do is we're going to make it also invisible. So again, this is one we don't want to see. The type, right here we see an output as being a vector, and I'm going to make it as a color output. So that doesn't mean that we're going to see a color right away, but this means that the signature of the vector is going to be a color signature. So the thing that we're having right now is, as you can see, outpost 0, outpost 1, outpost 2. And we have now exported a new attribute, and you see it. This is being represented as new attribute. Okay, so this concludes the second part of the VIX, and in this we have seen how we can add and remove parameters, how we can use external attributes to control things, and we also saw in the beginning how to do several kinds of conversions, going from float to vector, going from vector to float, how to take one specific component out of a vector, and of course this counts for many other conversions such as float to integer, integer to vector, and all those kind of things.